From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. The Alabama Legislature was back in session this week and completed the 17th and 18th legislative days of the 30-day session. That means we have 12 meeting days left that will take place between now and mid-May. There's a lot to get to, but the biggest news of the week came after lawmakers had already left town. The Senate will not be moving forward on a comprehensive gambling package this session. Earlier this week, Mary Sell of the Alabama Daily News reported that Senator Greg Albritton had draft legislation calling for a vote of the people to legalize a lottery, slot machine casinos, and sports betting. The plan also called for a compact with the Porch Creek Indians. The State House was abuzz all week with speculation over whether or not gambling would actually be debated this session. But late Thursday, Senate President Pro Tem Garland Gudger put that speculation to rest. In a statement, Gudger said, quote, "With 12 meeting days remaining in the session, both budgets still awaiting approval, and other important bills and measures demanding focus and attention, the comprehensive gaming bill released today is simply too little, too late, and has too few votes to pass," end quote. He also said that in order to pass such an ambitious gambling plan, the process would need to start well before the legislative session and include conversations with many stakeholders. As it happens, Senator Albritton, who was bringing that gambling bill, is our guest on Capitol Journal this week in an interview that we recorded before the statement was issued, which I suppose makes our conversation mostly academic. One of the more high-profile bills of this session was the subject of a public hearing this week. The House Health Committee took up legislation that would allow the Alabama Farmers Federation to offer health care plans to its members. House Bill 447 from Representative David Faulkner comes as Alpha leaders say the state's farmers can't afford their insurance premiums and need a better option. Such Farm Bureau plans exist in other states like Tennessee. But opponents of the bill, including Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Alabama and the American Cancer Society, say the plans offered wouldn't truly be health insurance and be subject to the same regulations, like the requirement to cover pre-existing conditions.
The Alabama farmers are facing the worst financial crisis since the 1980s. Alabama has lost 8% of its farms since 2017, and our state's farmers saw their income drop $1 billion in just 1 year recently, between 2022 and 2023. Soaring production costs combined with low commodity prices are pushing farmers out. As legislators, there is little we can do about fertilizer cost or the price of cotton, but we can make a difference in one of the largest household costs for many farmer families: health care coverage. The Alabama Farmers Federation is seeking authority to offer its members a health plan coverage similar to successful programs already approved in 10 other states. These Alpha health plans have the potential to save farmers and other self-employed families 30 to 60% on the cost of health coverage. These plans are needed because farmers and other small business owners often fall into a coverage gap.
We think it's a mistake to allow just one company to sell an unregulated health insurance plan operated entirely out of Tennessee, using United Health Insurance to make decisions on which claims will be paid and which will be denied. But we realize this is going to happen, and therefore it is entirely reasonable, in our opinion, for you to include some very basic protections, none of which interfere with Alpha's ability to sell the product or make a profit. Our goal from the start has been to find a path for you to vote yes on a bill, but one that includes at least some critical protections for consumers and healthcare providers.
That was just a public hearing, so no vote was taken on the bill. The committee is expected to take it up for a vote next week. I spoke more in depth on the issue with supporters and opponents of that bill for Thursday's Capitol Journal, which I encourage you to check out. You can find it on our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search Capitol Journal. That House Health Committee also held public hearings for other notable bills this week. House Bill 441 from Representative David Standridge would require speech pathology and audiology therapists to at least have an associate's degree in communication disorders or audiology to practice. And House Bill 445 from Representative Andy Witt would impose tougher restrictions on consumable hemp products, including gummies and CBD drinks. No vote was taken on either bill, but a Senate companion of that CBD restriction bill did pass a Senate committee this week. It was a big week in the House Education Policy Committee as lawmakers considered legislation on hot-button issues. House Bill 342 from Representative Susan DuBose would require local school boards to adopt policies allowing for students to leave campus to attend religious instruction programs. DuBose brought an amended version of the bill, attempting to clear up some of the guidelines, but members of the committee were skeptical that such a change in law is necessary.
This religious timed release was ruled constitutional in 1952 by the Supreme Court, and it has been popular throughout the country in the decades ever since. With the amendments that we voted on last week that were unanimously approved, we have made sure our local districts maintain control. Credits are optional. That will be decided by the school district. Policy and details of the program are within local control. That was in the Second Amendment that we passed unanimously last week. For example, in my city of Hoover, they've decided that religious release will be allowed only at the high school level, an 8th period, which is a specials period. Safeguards are provided by guidelines of the Supreme Court and any local policy guidelines the district may want to add.
I have an issue with the technical implementation of this. Besides, I feel like in my district, I've been made aware from the people that would have to be implementing this, that it's just another regulation for them. They're doing the best they can. They're already providing for students the best they can for this particular issue.
Because I'm like Representative Ross. I've been praying so much since I've been in the legislature. I'm so close to God. I have become I certainly believe in religious education, but I believe when you talked about parents, I really am a big proponent of parents exposing their children.
That bill failed on a vote of 4-9. Other notable bills before the committee included House Bill 178 from Representative Mark Gidley, which would require public school campuses, including K-12 and community colleges, to display the 10 Commandments. That bill was carried over and could return. House Bill 179, also from Gidley, would allow public schools to hire chaplains or allow volunteers to fill that role. That bill was approved and goes to the full House. And House Bill 246 from Representative Scott Stadhagen would offer legal protections to schools that choose not to use modern gender pronouns. That bill was carried over and a new version is expected to emerge. The House Judiciary Committee this week considered legislation aimed to expand the scope of specialty courts to help those dealing with addiction and mental illness. Senate Bill 200 is sponsored by Senator Andrew Jones and is championed by Chief Justice Sarah Stewart. It would change the current drug courts to accountability courts and allow them to include veterans and those dealing with mental illness.
Rename drug courts to accountability courts and expand the scope of whom the accountability courts would serve to include offenders with mental illness and offenders who are veterans to further provide for the duties of administration office of the courts.
By combining the courts, does that save money, or what's the purpose of doing that?
Oh, well, we've got, at this point in time, I believe there's 12 veterans courts throughout the state. We wanted to expand those, took the opportunity as we're doing that to restructure, to give every court a pathway in Alabama to do veterans court, mental illness court.
All 67 counties have accountability courts.
Well, they have the drug courts now, and then some of them have formed these other courts through that, this would allow it to be better.
That bill was approved by the committee and now goes to the full House. This week saw the first movement on state budgets. The general fund saw action in committee and on the House floor. Capitol Journal's Randy Scott has that and other legislative developments from the House.
Representative Rex Reynolds gets to the point about the general fund budget.
We're in a good position in the general fund. Two things. A, we started off the fiscal year higher than we thought. We had some additional revenues, and that's because of the conservative budget that you passed last year. Left some revenue on the table, and that's what we're supposed to do. This year we'll do the same at a higher percentage.
The General Fund Committee met to discuss House Bill 186 and other bills making up the new general fund budget. All passed, and they now go to the House floor. In the Education Trust Fund Committee meeting, members work on Senate Bill 1, which sets up guidelines for worker compensation for teachers and other school staff.
So I appreciate Representative Faulkner, Senator Gavan, Representative Alban, all of y'all working together, like you said, over spring break. And I saw Senator Gavan last night, and he mentioned he would not be here this morning, but and I think working with the finance department as well to make sure that everybody's concerned. So I think we've got a bill that everybody has agreed to that we can move forward with in good faith.
Senate Bill 1 is approved. Thursday, House debate over House Bill 166. This measure addresses the notion of cell phone usage in schools.
Our bill that is going to remove cell phones from our classrooms, essentially they'll still be on the property, but they will be turned off and stored off the body of the person. The local boards will be deciding how those policies get implemented. That is really the only requirement. This is just setting that as the floor.
I do think that those devices need to be somewhere where those children can call parents or even call 911 and say somebody is shooting in our school or whatever, because that has happened too.
House Bill 166 passes. The general fund budget also reaches the House floor. Lawmakers have a lengthy discussion, including talks on why some items were initially taken out and finding a solution to those changes.
A good, solid bill that supports our state agencies, our state services, and economic development in Alabama.
Jazz Hall of Fame in Birmingham, of course, the Magic City Classic, and I think there was
Civil Rights Museum.
And the Civil Rights Museum.
And Green Lawn.
The museum, the Civil Rights Museum actually is in the district that I represent. And I know you said that several people had reached out to you over the course of the past few days and that you were going to do what you could to make, as best you could to make sure that those items are in place.
I joined my colleagues on the Democratic side. We walked up to the Senate, had that conversation, and we had some assurance that they would put those back in the budget, and I would protect those line items when they come back.
The general fund budget is approved. At the State House, Randy Scott, Capitol Journal.
More on that general fund budget that passed the House this week. It totals $3.7 billion, which is an increase of about $341 million from the budget passed last year. The largest share of the budget is directed towards the Alabama Department of Corrections at $826 million, Medicaid at $955 million, the Department of Public Health at $131 million, and the Department of Mental Health at $239 million. Turning now to the Alabama Senate, where controversial legislation dealing with weight limits for log trucks was debated this week. Senate Bill 110, sponsored by Senator Jack Williams, originally sought to raise axle weight limits for log trucks, something supporters said would help the timber industry and prevent drivers from being unfairly hit with fines and court costs. But the proposal met resistance from ALEA and the Alabama Department of Transportation. They warned that heavier axle loads could damage roads and bridges and create added safety risks for drivers. On the Senate floor, Williams accepted amendments from Senator Clyde Chambliss. Under the revised bill, axle weight limits will stay the same, but there are now changes to how enforcement is handled. The amended version would limit how many trucks can be stopped at one time for weight checks, and it gives drivers more options to challenge portable scale readings.
if you're there at the scales and you're within 10 miles of the mill, then you can go ahead and go to the mill with one of the troopers and weigh your truck at the mill. And if that set of scales that weighs gross, and those scales are certified by Ag and Industries, and so it's not just, it is regulated. But if that gross shows that you are under gross, well, then that ticket goes away because it's obviously a false high. Well, let's say you're 90 miles from a mill. So the second part of this would allow the trucker to go to any certified scale, weigh his truck, and if he's under gross when he gets there, it's obvious that our temporary scales, our portable scales, gave a false high because of an air ride system or whatever, and then that ticket goes away.
Our local economy, the people, as these trucks come out of the woods, every one of them stops and gets a Coke and a candy bar or something. So it helps all our economy at our little stores out in the country because they're not going by big stores where they're at, where they're coming from out of the woods.
That bill passed the Senate unanimously and now heads to the House for further debate. Some tense drama in the County and Municipal Government Committee this week as two Republican senators from Baldwin County clashed over Senate Bill 270. The bill would change how local sales tax dollars are distributed in Baldwin County, particularly for cities like Gulf Shores and Orange Beach, who split away from the Baldwin County school system. State Senator Chris Elliott had his colleague, Senator April Weaver, sponsor the bill as a statewide measure rather than as a local bill. That caught fellow Baldwin County Senator Greg Albritton by surprise in the middle of the committee meeting. Albritton accused Elliott of trying to sidestep the local legislative process. The two sparred back and forth in a tense and at times personal debate.
In Baldwin County, we levy a tax countywide. That tax is for education.
We've had this argument. We've gone through this many times. You and I have, and others have, and the courts have. My angst is not only just a matter of what we're doing and how this is going about, but trying to do the end run around between the local legislation and making it a general law. And if it gets out of committee and gets on the floor, I'm going to filibuster this as much as I possibly can.
What we have now is taking from children in two school systems just because they happen to be in a different school system. Their parents are, I would prefer not to be interrupted again.
I understand that. I would prefer that we not have this discussion openly, but you've made this the point. All that is correct, and yet the school systems that broke away and the Baldwin County school system had this discussion, had an agreement. It was actually completed by those folks, and now it's already gone through the courts, and now we're trying to legislatively change. That's all I'm saying.
You all need to be making this decision. You don't need to have a law for us to pass. Because if you allow us to start making this decision for you, we're going to be passing a law to make another decision for you. And only you can make the decision of what is in the best interest of your people.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
I am opposed, and I'll be loud about it so that the chairman can hear how loud I say no.
The bill's carried over.
As you can see, that bill was carried over and is likely dead. The committee also considered Senate Bill 247 from Senator Arthur Orr, which would restrict protests near private homes. Orr introduced a similar measure last year that failed to gain traction. This time, he pointed to protests targeting public officials from both parties, saying they've raised serious safety concerns for families. But opponents argue that the bill infringes on First Amendment rights.
A Democratic congressman in Ohio, where people went to his house and for several days couldn't get in and out, had to have law enforcement to get his family in and out of his house, and just what a terribly intimidating and scary situation to be in, and we ought to do something about it.
In reality, it's often accidental. one that most protesters are willing to fix themselves. SB 247 is not only a bad bill, but an assault on the First Amendment rights and voices of marginalized Alabamians.
My daughter lives in downtown Birmingham. She lives in a loft downtown. I just don't know. And there's so many lofts downtown. So where would you actually go to have even a peaceful protest in downtown Birmingham and not be near residents? So again, it's not that it's permissive and the municipalities get a chance to set this. It says municipalities can adopt a more stringent regulation. Just wanted to make that clarification.
The committee advanced that bill, and it now goes to the full Senate. The Senate on Thursday took up legislation aimed at streamlining the process for parents seeking religious exemptions from school vaccination requirements. Senate Bill 85 from Senator Arthur Orr would allow parents to submit a written declaration directly to schools, eliminating the need to obtain exemption forms from county health departments. Democratic lawmakers opposed the bill, expressing concerns about potential impacts on public health. An amendment was added requiring that if a child receives a religious exemption, parents must provide a health form confirming the child has not had any communicable diseases in the last 12 months.
We didn't expand the law. All we did was streamline the process, and we took out of the process having to go to the health department to get a piece of paper that they have to give you anyway. It's not a discretionary function. It is a mandatory function that they have to give you the religious exemption paper. So why are we doing that? Let's just let parents affirm that they have a religious exemption as they go to the schools and put that in writing for the schools and admit the child.
You know, you have to have an immunization form when kids first enroll. So are we doing away with that? Are kids not going to be required, parents are not going to be required to have that form? It was always a blue form, as I remember.
I don't think so.
The requirement for the immunization form?
No, I'm sorry. I don't think so. All we're doing is you're taking out the middle step, which they're going to get the piece of paper anyway. Now, they may be browbeat, they may not. I don't know. It's just kind of a hassle to go to the health department, get the little form, and come back. We're just taking out that middle step.
That bill passed 26-5 and now goes to the House. That was the only bill that the Senate took up Thursday, partly because of a mini filibuster on the part of State Senator Roger Smitherman. He was unhappy about two things: the lack of Democratic bills on the agenda and cuts to the Magic City Classic and other items in the House-passed general fund budget. Republicans have vowed to restore those funding cuts, but Smitherman still took the opportunity to slow it down in the Senate.
Now, all of a sudden, we're a minority, and it's a third of the agenda is not ours. We had 0 bills on here. You know, I mean, you might have saw my name at the end, but that was a co-signer. I'm not the sponsor, the main sponsor of the bill. So with that, and I've talked about that, this is probably my third or fourth straight day, and it was not addressed. So we can't be passing bills if we're not going to have an opportunity to have our bills presented to the full Senate. The second thing is that the budget in the House, it may have had more in it, but it had 6 things cut from Jefferson County, zeroed out. And yet you had other things from other counties increased. So that's no justification. And you know, I'll let you all make the determination of what I'm saying.
There were some other notable bills moving in the Senate this week. Senate Bill 252 from Senator Billy Beasley, the Pharmacy Benefit Manager bill that passed the Senate last month, was in the House Insurance Committee. An amendment was made to the bill removing liability protections for pharmacies who violate the law. The amended version passed committee and now goes to the full House. Senate Bill 245 from Senator Arthur Orr would require regular eligibility cross-checks for public assistance programs like Medicaid and food stamps. It passed the Senate Health Committee. And Senate Bill 268 from Senator Bobby Singleton was the subject of a public hearing this week. This is the bill allowing for so-called ready-to-drink beverages containing liquor, like High Noons, to be sold in grocery and convenience stores. No vote was taken, but expect to hear more on that bill as the session continues next week. Speaking of notable legislation, Governor Kay Ivey this week signed into law Senate Bill 199, the Paid Parental Leave Law. Under the law, state and education employees are offered paid time off after having or adopting children. New mothers will receive 8 weeks paid time off, and new fathers will receive 2 weeks. The law also offers limited time off for those experiencing stillbirths or miscarriages. It does not allow paid time off after abortions. The law will go into effect July 1st. As busy as the State House was this week, next week promises to be even more action-packed. That's partly because lawmakers are preparing to take up the state's largest ever education trust fund budget. Senator Arthur Orr, who chairs the Senate Finance and Taxation Education Committee, says the plan is ready to be introduced next week. Alongside it, there's a proposal to change how schools are funded in Alabama. Capitol Journal's Jeff Sanders has more.
Senator Arthur Orr has been working on the Education Trust Fund budget for several weeks. This year, the budget is projected at $9.9 billion, a 6% increase over the current year and the largest education budget in state history.
We'll be on the floor for sure on Thursday, to be determined whether we have a 2-day or 3-day work week next week. But we do know Thursday will be the day that the educational budget will be on the floor.
Along with the budget, Orr is also introducing the RAISE Act, short for Rewarding Advancement in Instruction and Student Excellence. The proposal would change how Alabama funds its K-12 public schools. It came out of a legislative commission that studied the state's current funding model last year.
It will better support our public schools for children in poverty, children that are English language learners, children that are gifted, and for those that have special educational needs. It'll address those 4 buckets of students and give schools the additional resources that to educate those children with, because the studies have shown that for those children it requires additional resources.
Orr says the new model is designed to better serve students who need more support without overhauling the entire system.
This is the hybrid model. You'll see the foundation program remaining intact, and this is coming on top of that particular funding out of the foundation.
Once the Senate approves its version of the Education Trust Fund budget, it then heads to the House for further review and possible changes. Reporting from the State House in Montgomery, I'm Jeff Sanders for Capitol Journal.
Turning now to Washington, where tariff is the watchword of the week. President Donald Trump followed through on his commitment to place wide-ranging tariffs on foreign imports, a decision that is already having an economic impact across the country and here in Alabama. The state's congressional delegation is reacting to the situation, with Republicans mostly praising the tariffs, saying they believe they will spur domestic job growth. But some economists aren't so sure. Our own Alex Engel reports from Capitol Hill.
Alabama's GOP lawmakers are standing behind Trump and his tariffs that he announced on Wednesday, calling it Liberation Day. But Democratic Congresswoman Terry Sewell says her constituents will not be liberated.
It's our declaration of economic independence.
President Donald Trump exuded confidence this week, announcing a 10% tariff on imports from all countries during an event in the Rose Garden on Wednesday. He was surrounded by auto and steel workers.
For years, hardworking American citizens were forced to sit on the sidelines as other nations got rich and powerful, much of it at our expense. But now it's our turn to prosper.
Trump also announced higher tariffs for countries that have a larger trade deficit with the United States. Alabama's Republican lawmakers are supporting the president's efforts. Senator Tommy Tuberville says there will be short-term pain because of higher prices, but he says the tariffs are a necessary tool.
Tariffs are our only chance to get industry back in this country, get domestic workers here, to get them back employed.
But economists warn the tariffs will make most goods like cars and clothes more expensive for Americans, and they say it'll strain global trade. An economics professor at Troy University, John Dove, says some industries have stockpiled supplies ahead of the tariffs, which could lead to a delay in higher prices for some goods.
Kind of depending on the industry, depending on the products that we're talking about, we're probably looking at, weeks to potentially several months before we really do start to see significant increases in prices on those consumer products. Some have already begun to rise.
Dove says tariffs can raise revenue, but he says they also create a lot of uncertainty. Trump also put a 25% tariff on auto imports. Alabama has multiple automakers located in the state. Congresswoman Terry Sewell says the tariffs will hurt auto workers and all of her constituents.
We all know that tariffs are just another word for a tax, and that tax is going to be passed on to the consumers.
On the agriculture side, Tuberville says higher tariffs on countries like Vietnam will help Alabama's catfish and shrimp farmers.
U.S. catfish and shrimp producers have faced some of the worst blows.
Global financial markets are now reeling after the tariff announcement. It's unclear if Trump will keep the tariffs permanent or lower or drop them at some point. Reporting on Capitol Hill, Alex Engel, Capitol Journal.
Last month saw a funding freeze from the Trump administration that impacted agencies and institutions here in Alabama. Many were concerned about how those freezes or cuts could impact education at a time when the state is starting to see some real gains. But Senator Arthur Orr, who chairs the Senate Education Budget Committee, says the state is in a good position financially when it comes to school funding.
Dr. Mackey and I discussed it this week, and to be determined. The state of Alabama did a very good job of pushing that money out. My recollection, he said there was only $8 million that had can be left. It hadn't been clawed back, it's just been frozen for now. But there are some states that have hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that have not been dispersed. And so we're in very good shape as far as that is concerned in Alabama. And credit to the State Department of Education for pushing that money out to educational systems around the state.
Thursday marked the 200th anniversary of the visit of Marquis de Lafayette to Montgomery. Lafayette, of course, was the French general who served under George Washington and was a hero of the Revolutionary War. Later in life, he was among the most famous men on earth, traveling the world to advocate for fundamental ideals like freedom of speech and religious tolerance. Thursday, Governor Kay Ivey, Supreme Court Justice Will Sellers, and other state leaders marked the occasion with a special ceremony that included some reenactments of Lafayette's famous Montgomery speech.
With America's 50th birthday on the horizon, President James Monroe sought to reunite our new country and restore patriotism. He invited his old friend and fellow Revolutionary War comrade, the famous General Marquis de Lafayette, to visit the United States. The Marquis eagerly accepted. The triumphal return of this great hero of the American Revolution was met with universal enthusiasm and renewed patriotic fervor across our hamlet of our growing nation. General Lafayette's arrival in Alabama was a turning point. For Alabamians, the Marquis de Lafayette's presence placed us on the map, elevating our status as an equal among our fellow states in the process of growing a freedom-loving nation.
I am sensibly affected by the honors conferred upon me by the American people. The kindness with which they have received my conduct has magnified my merit. I have seen here the best proofs of a great, prosperous, and happy people in the rapid advancements of the polite and useful arts and in the stability of your free institutions.
After the event inside the Capitol, a wreath-laying ceremony took place at Lafayette's commemorative marker there on the Capitol grounds. Those involved in planning the event, including Justice Sellers, said it's important to remember such important figures in American history and to make sure younger generations understand the remarkable founding of the United States. There will be a lot to commemorate over the next year. In just 2 weeks, we will mark 250 years since Paul Revere's famous ride to alert the Massachusetts countryside that the British were coming. And next year will be the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Look forward to that. Before we get to our interviews, some fun this week. Governor Kay Ivey this week paid a visit to St. James School here in Montgomery, where fourth graders were putting on a show about Alabama history. It included students dressing up as notable Alabamians. And of course, one student, Caroline Lindsay, dressed as Governor Kay Ivey herself. And she didn't hold back with her presentation, which included Governor Ivey's famous high-stepping line. Take a look.
There ain't no step too high for a high stepper. My name is Kay Ivey. I am a leader with mine, the current governor of Alabama, fighting for what's right. With strength and grace, I lead the way in Alabama's sun through night and day. Disasters, economy, and education, preparing my state for the next generation.
And after the show, Caroline got to chat with Governor Ivey. There she is, pictured with the boss, and her father, Nathan Lindsay, who is Ivey's deputy chief of staff. That's just great. No step too high for a high stepper. I really love the attention to detail. She had the state of Alabama pin, and the shoes were just right too. So way to go, Caroline. We'll be right back.
Alabama Public Television is your place for quality educational services. Free professional development for educators and child care providers. Access to free curriculum-aligned videos, lesson plans, and instructional resources with PBS Learning Media. And all the PBS Kids programs parents know and trust. Learn something new every day with Alabama Public Television. Visit us at aptv.org/education to learn more.
You're watching Alabama Public Television, celebrating 70 years of service to Alabama.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. Joining me next is State Senator Greg Albritton, Chairman of the Senate General Fund Budget Committee. Mr. Chairman, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's get into it. Gambling. Your bill, the reporting on your bill started on Sunday with Mary Sell, very thorough reporting. Something's changed since then, and I want to get into the specifics.
Sure.
It's very important. But I wanted to start with why. Why are we doing this again? Why are we talking about this again? We saw what happened last year. Seems like
wasn't that fun?
Sometimes it was fun to cover. But again, everybody thought, man, after all that, they're never going to touch this again. So why do it? Why take this really monumental task of bringing up gambling again?
Because it hasn't gone away. Gambling's still here, and it's growing exponentially. Whenever you look at the basketball games that's going on, and the Sweet 16 and the ESPN ads that's there, it's all over, and it will continue to grow. Since it won't go away, the issue doesn't die. We've got to deal with it.
Okay.
It's a social ill, Todd. Just like this week, we've been dealing with RTDs, ready-to-drink stuff. We've been dealing with cannabis and marijuana stuff. They are all social ills that's among us that we have to control, that we have to deal with. The same thing true with gambling.
So you're saying the legislature is taking action to regulate CBD, cannabinoid, all that stuff, alcohol. And so you consider gambling right up there in terms of needed regulation.
Even more so, yes, because it's running rampant right now, and we're just sitting back watching it.
Okay, let's get into the specifics. I know there are a lot of them, but walk me through the basics of what your bill, as it exists now, does.
Okay. We are basically capturing the business, the state exercising a sovereign role of controlling this industry. We're capping it, stopping the growth, wildfire growth, I'll say it that way, because what we're doing is we're taking the issue like the lottery and we're establishing that. We've done that several other times. It hasn't changed. Then we take a look at where we have these, 19 local CAs that's authorizing 6 different sites in the state where gambling takes care of different types, pari-mutuel, HHR, historical horse racing, and bingo and electronic bingo. Those are 6 sites that's somewhat legal. And we're going to capture all of that, and we're going to keep it at the same thing. We're going to authorize these same 6 sites to do the same things. Now, they won't be doing all of that. The market will govern that, but it'll be limited to just those 6 sites and limited to the lottery. We don't have anything set up in Northeast Corner. We don't have any room for Class 3 gaming at all. Class 2 gaming, and this is federal discussion, but Class 2 gaming will be at those places that we designate. Then we take sports gaming, and we tether that sports gaming to those same 6 sites. We don't open up special bars. We don't put special places out. It's tethered to those same 6 sites. Now, they'll be tethered physically and also electronically, so that an individual can download the apps, let's say from Green Track, and then they can make their bets on their phone through that entity.
Okay.
That way the state knows what's happening, who's doing what, and by how much.
Okay. Also, there's a requirement, I think there's a way I read that the state enter into a compact with the Port Spanish Creek Indian.
That's correct. That's the only statement that's made. We require a compact to be made, but we don't set up anything. We don't isolate anything. That's going to be between the governor and PCI as to what type and where and how that works.
Okay. Talk about revenue.
Well, before we go there,
Okay.
let me make one more thing clear. If they enter into a compact, the governor and PCI, that they're going to open a separate entity or a separate place, they've got to come back to the state legislature for another CA.
I was going to ask you about that because that's always been a question, right? There's
Exactly.
So Porch Creeks have purchased that Birmingham facility.
Correct.
But that's already in with
That's
the
one of the 6.
existing 6,
Exactly.
right? So they would kind of be in 2 different worlds with their federally, recognized lands. But if they did pick up another site, you're saying that would have to come back to the legislature?
If they picked up another site, they'd have to come back to the legislature to get that approved.
Okay, well that's interesting because it might that might be a disincentive for adding an extra site because that might be hard to pass.
Precisely.
Okay, interesting.
It will be hard to pass. That's why I'm doing it that way.
Well, talk about revenue. What are the tax levels and where does the money go?
24%, just like we had before. Plus, we're putting taxes on every machine, electronic machine, HHR or electronic, and we're also putting an excise tax on each and every bet, sports bet that's made. Small, 1% on those smaller bets and 2% on the larger bets.
Okay. And how much revenue are you projecting? And I mean, that's the real thing, is where does this money actually
Well, it's
go?
It's hard to gauge how much this will generate, but our estimates are on a rounded number, somewhere around 750, 800 mil.
Okay. How do you divide it up?
That's been a major controversy, but I think we've come to an agreement on that.
Okay.
We're going to take, think of it as 2 pools. The lottery is one pool, and then the other gaming is a separate pool. But we're going to take the whole group, and we're going to take $150 million, and we're going to send that to DOT.
Okay.
All right? Roads and Bridges.
Roads and Bridges, yeah.
Now, and then we're going to take the remainder of ETF. They don't pay all the 150, don't misunderstand. But it'll be somewhere around 200 mil or so, and that will go to the ETF straight out of the lottery, okay? Then we're going to take the rest of the gaming aspects, and that's where a good portion of the 150 comes out of, and we're going to take divide that up to locals and different percentages to different places.
Counties and cities.
Counties and cities, mostly counties, and then to DAs and to sheriffs and to roads and bridges in the counties and that type of thing.
Okay.
And then the rest goes to the general fund.
The general fund. So that means the legislature would basically determine year to year, they'd have a certain amount of money to say, we want this project this year. That would be a year-to-year decision. Budget.
Correct, just like the regular budget process.
Right.
Exactly.
Another revenue stream.
Exactly. Now, if you break that out and see how much that is, you're going to wind up with about 200 million or so, and these are rough estimates, to the ETF, and basically about 200 million to the general fund.
Mm-hmm.
Not a whole lot of money overall.
Now, in Mary's first story, and so your first iteration of the bill, you had some money set aside for health care, and you talked about the importance of that and all the health care challenges. That's out now.
It is.
How did that come about?
The demands for getting votes.
Okay.
And frankly, we had no money set up for that. All we had was a paragraph there authorizing monies to be spent for that. That's not in there any longer.
I see. So it wasn't like exactly a line item. It was just this is a authorized
potential authorization.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's what it gets down to. Is obviously fell short in the Senate last year. Not the same bill, but the issue did. And the conventional wisdom is you're down a vote because Senator Greg Reed is off, and he was a yes vote, and that seat's not getting filled. So how do you get the votes? How are you going about talking with your colleagues about picking up votes, presumably from those who were a no last year and have been a no?
Good question. Some things just aren't easy. Maybe that's why they call it work. But persuasion, illustration, and hopefully recognition. By that I mean last year it was the folks were adamant, no sports gaming at all. Well, it only took a few months for people to understand and comprehend that it's a real problem that we need to get in. So now I believe most folks are on board with doing the sports gaming end of it too. So we don't have that hurdle to overcome.
Well, let's get into that a little bit because you're I don't think anybody disputes that illegal gambling in Alabama is a problem and has been for a while. And now the emergence of sports bet, and that's a super addictive, it's just so easy to do. And I guess they're doing it offshore. So that's what a lot of opponents will
They're doing it in the State House, okay?
Well, right, but it's like the app takes you to like the Bahamas or something because it's technically illegal. But all right, so let's just say this all passes, and here's what the opponents are telling me. All right, you say you're going to regulate, you say you're going to get under control, but it could be opening a Pandora's box, and why would we want to do that? Thinking about getting more people addicted to a social ill like gambling, and unintended consequences. Could there be more expansion that we know of that could be down the road? That's what opponents say. That's what makes a lot of opponents hesitant to get into an expanded
Those
gambling.
opponents, if I might be so bold, those opponents are just flat wrong. We're not opening any box. That box has had the lid blown off some time ago. It's already proliferating. It's already there. If we don't think it's not affecting our junior high kids now, we're just hiding ourselves. It is proliferating throughout our community. And one of the reasons we can't get it passed is because the interests don't want it to pass. Because this is a free-for-all here. This is the Wild West when it comes to this. There's more people gaining more money out of Alabama because we're not watching it. That's what we've got to do. We've got to grab this and control it. Alabama has a moral obligation to take control of this industry and to regulate it properly, just like it does RTDs and everything else. Even to the chicken houses, we regulate, but we can't seem to regulate gambling. And there's a reason for that, and that's because it's economically difficult for people to allow us to control it.
Well, we're going to watch this issue very closely, obviously, and I really appreciate you coming on and explaining everything. It wouldn't be a session if we're not talking about gambling, but I really appreciate your candor.
I hope to end that, okay? I hope to end that.
Fair enough, fair enough. Thanks again for coming on, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is Lindsey Gray, Director of the Southern Office of the Council of State Governments. Lindsay, welcome to Capitol Journal.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I know y'all are in town because you're planning for this big conference coming up. The Council of State Governments, the Southern Office, has its conference in Birmingham this year.
Yes.
Colloquially known as SLC, the old Southern Legislative Conference.
Yes.
So before we get into the conference, can you share with us a little bit about the Council of State Governments, its history and mission?
We actually our office started as the Southern Legislative Conference, so we will never veer away from that. That
SLC,
is how we are known. But in the 40s, we started as the Southern Legislative Conference, and in the 50s, we came under the umbrella of CSG, or the Council of State Governments, as their Southern office. So we stayed true to our roots, though, of course, and we will never release the Southern Legislative Conference name, but we are affectionately known as CSG South, or the Council of State Governments Southern Office, since the 50s, and trying to adopt that so where we have that regional focus, but we also are part of national impact as well.
Sure. So the big conference is coming up, and this every year there's a different city. Yes. It was in Mobile. I guess
2015.
2015, yeah. So 10 years, we're back in Alabama. I guess last year it was West Virginia. There was Charleston. There was Nashville. So every state kind of gets their day in the sun. And now with Speaker Nathaniel Ledbetter being the chairman, it's our turn.
That's right.
So Birmingham, I guess it's going to be in July, right?
We'll be in July. So SLC is always very hot, but because we're in our southern states, we do go between 15 southern states that make up the southern region. And it is Alabama's turn under Speaker Ledbetter. He's been a wonderful chair to us, and Birmingham was selected out of all the cities. They're able to support the size of conference that we've become, but we are focused on legislators and making sure that they have access to policy sessions for a 4-day period. But also we're Southerners, so we love a good hospitality, and it almost feels like a family reunion over 4 days. So it's going to be pretty exciting, and we're happy to be hosting it in Birmingham. I'm from Alabama, so I love being able to come back home and hosting this in a place that's very near and dear to me as well.
Troy University, right?
I'm a Troy University grad as well.
How about that? Very proud Troy grad. Well, talk about these conferences, because it's a way, so much legislation between states, it can be similar.
Correct.
States deal with similar issues. So is this the conference a way for people to kind of, collaborate and get together on, well, hey, we dealt with the same issue in Louisiana that you're dealing with in Alabama, that you're dealing with in South Carolina. Is that kind of the idea?
Yes, we're a nonpartisan organization, so we actually bring both sides of the aisle together to discuss policy matters that are affecting our southern states. We have similar challenges and opportunities, as you mentioned, that it's important for southern states to talk to each other and to convene around these policy topics and to really figure out what the best solution is for each of those states, and for their political views as well. So we find that this is also a time for folks to reach across the aisle and reach across the state lines in order to share that policy. Some of the weather events, for example, that we've been seeing, extreme flooding and hurricanes and tornadoes, are really similar among our states as well. So there's certain policy areas, of course it's not just weather events, but there's certain policy areas and activities that we certainly can rally around, and we never tell a legislator how to vote. It is truly bringing the facts to them, and then they can figure out for themselves where all of this lands for them and what exact language they might want to use in law and in policies that they're forming.
When I was talking to the speaker, he was really excited about becoming chair for the, just for the sake of bringing the conference to Alabama, because of the economic impact.
Yes.
We get to showcase the state. We love doing that, but it's also a pretty big economic impact.
That's correct. We usually do a third-party study after the conference so we can take actuals. In the last 2 years, we've been able to have economic impacts in South Carolina and West Virginia around the $6 million to $8 million mark in those four-day periods. Early conservative projections for Alabama is $5.7 million in economic impact. So we're excited about those early projections, but I'm excited about the actuals afterwards. So we partner with a third party, usually a university or that has a hospitality office or something like that, to pull the appropriate numbers. We're able to provide those actuals. So it is that policy forum, but it's also an economic impact for the state, and we're excited to showcase that.
We're excited too, and it's not too late to register, right?
Correct.
So if folks are interested, we get a lot of lobbyists and folks to watch the show. How might they go about doing that?
CSGSouth.org, and they'll click on the Southern Legislative Conference, and the registration button will be right there. So we make it pretty easy for them to see when the policy sessions will be, on what day. All of that's outlined there. So it's just CSGSouth.org, and they'll see the Southern Legislative Conference note very large on the website.
All right, I'm going to go register right now because I don't want the rooms to
Exactly.
run out. And we should talk about that because we're going to be broadcasting Capitol Journal from SLC, and we're really excited. Thank you all for letting us broadcast.
Well, I love that you are our official media partner this summer, and we definitely want to make sure that you have a wonderful space to broadcast, and hopefully we can even bring some legislators from other states.
That's what we're hoping.
On the screen and have a really fruitful conversation.
Absolutely. Well, Lindsay, we're looking forward to SLC. Thanks for spending some time with us to preview it, and we'll see you in Birmingham.
Great. Thank you. Can't wait.
We'll be right back.
At 2 p.m. on February 16, 1968, the very first 911 call was made in Haleyville, Alabama. The call was made by State Representative Rankin Veit from Haleyville Mayor James Witt's office and was answered by U.S. Representative Tom Bevel at the Haleyville Police Station on a bright red telephone that was given to the city by the Alabama Telephone Company. Haleyville still celebrates their part in 911 history with an annual festival.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll return to our nightly coverage of the legislative session on Monday, right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.